Today we're jumping back to our NHL offseason plan series. Now we're looking at the 20th ranked team from the NHL's regular season, the Buffalo Sabres. What moves should we expect from Buffalo to get ready for next season? And can they make that last jump to get back into the playoffs? They were oh so close this past year. We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're looking at the offseason plan of the Buffalo Sabres. Now, we're going to be conducting a full series of videos on the entire league for this exact same thing here, looking at the offseason plans of all the teams. Right now, we're on the 20th ranked team, the Buffalo Sabres. So we're doing these in order, in case you're new to the series, from how they finished in the regular season. So we've started with Team 32 and worked our way up so far to number 20. We'll continue on till we get to number 1, and we'll kind of go from here. So if you're looking for certain teams, look at the standings and look at the channel to see if they've come out or not as of yet. They'll be coming out gradually over the next several days and weeks. Now, as in case you're also new to the series, we're going to quickly just run down how these work. So we're going to recount last season first. We're going to take a look at team statistics, how they managed, overall, take a look at some key metrics, look at some of the key moves in team made throughout the season or the NHL trade deadline, analyze their salary cap space, look at some internal business like RFAs, UFAs, things like that, who's eligible for contract extensions, and then what are the top questions facing the team going into the offseason. So let's get started and recap the 22-23 season here for the Buffalo Sabres. So as I mentioned, they had a nice improvement with a record of 42-33-7 for 91 points. That was a big jump this year. They just missed the playoffs by a single point. Ultimately, the Florida Panthers grabbed that final spot, largely due to the fact that the Pittsburgh Penguins couldn't seal it up and lost some critical games down the stretch. And now look at the Panthers. They find themselves in the Eastern Conference Finals. So this goes to show more further proof that just get in and anything can happen. So within that, they also scored the third highest number of goals in the NHL this year with 296. They were a high-powered offensive team. But unfortunately, they had a hard time keeping the puck out of their net, which is why they didn't have more success. They had to win a lot of higher scoring games. They gave up 300 goals. So even though they were the third highest scoring team, they were the 26th worst team with goals against defensively, and they still finished with a negative goal differential of -4. Most teams that were anywhere near that for scoring, which much more on the positive side, and certainly had a better record to show of it. Now the power play also, again, because of being so strong offensively, was pretty good. They had a record of 23.4% success rate for 9th best, so a top 10 power play. Again, something that's critical on your way to being a playoff team. So that part was great. But the defensive issues certainly showed their ugly head again on the PK side of things, with only a 73% success rate, which was the 28th best PK in the NHL. So certainly they need to get better killing penalties. They need to get better at just overall team defense. Goaltending was a bit of an issue throughout the season, but that might not be an issue moving forward, which we'll discuss. But obviously they had lots of different guys between the pipes throughout the season. As I mentioned, they were the 20th ranked team in the NHL. They did make some moves throughout the season, nothing too crazy. They traded a few players at the NHL trade deadline, really nothing much. So they traded the rights of young goalie Eric Portillo because they had every indication he was not going to sign with them as he completes his college career. So why not get something in return and move him along? Rasmus Asplund and Anders Bjork were players that didn't really fit with the team's future, and they were able to move them along for a small return as well. And they also picked up Jordan Greenway as part of some of those trades. Jordan Greenway was a player in Minnesota looking for a fresh start. Has great size and strength, and he certainly has fit pretty decent in Buffalo so far. They also signed big contract extensions throughout the season for Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, and Matthias Samuelsson. All three of those guys proved to be critical members of the team's future. Now looking at their salary cap space for next season as we go into the offseason here, they have $19.45 million available according to CapFriendly.com. They have $64 million used on their salary cap space, but they do have a decent amount of players that need to be either extended for beyond next season or that need new contracts this year. So now let's transition into the internal business side of this video, where we take a look at their expiring deals, restricted and unrestricted free agents. So these players either need to be re-signed or possibly replaced. So let's take a look at that. On the RFA side, pretty easy. They have Tyson Jost and Kale Clague. Nothing too substantial. A lot of their other RFA business was previously already taken care of, so nothing big there. They can decide if they want to retain those players. If they do, they're not going to come at a very high expense, so those will not be difficult to take care of. On the UFA side, they have Kyle Okposo, who was their captain this year. Sounds like Okposo still wants to play. I would suspect that they'll try to bring him back. He's likely going to have to take a pay cut, though, because he was previously making $6 million. He's mostly been playing fourth line, contributing in a different way. So I would suspect if Okposo was back, it's going to have to be for far less money. They also have Zegvis Girgensons, Vinny Hinostroza, and Craig Anderson as UFAs. Craig Anderson sounds like he's finally going to retire. It was reported earlier in the year that Hinostroza was a player that they were trying to move to see if they get him more of an opportunity. So, to be honest, I don't think Hinostroza's back. There was word that the team had interest in re-signing Girgensons, however. So I think Okposo and Girgensons likely get re-signed. They won't be overly expensive to take care of, though, which will still give them some money if they want to make other additions to free agency or make some trades to take on more salary in other ways. Some key players, though, that are eligible for extensions, obviously, which wouldn't impact the salary cap for the coming season, but the year after and beyond, would be a top defenseman, Rasmus Dahlin, another top defenseman and former first overall pick, Owen Power, coming into his entry-level contract. Power had a phenomenal season. And then Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen as well, eligible for an extension, so they need to make a decision on his future. And Casey Middlestad, who certainly had his ups and downs throughout his tenure in Buffalo, but it sounds like he's finally really kind of found a spot where he fits, and he's being more consistent, more productive, and I think he's got his future sorted out there. But all those guys, certainly probably going to be looking for more money, and obviously they got to manage their cap to figure out how they all fit into the long-term equation there. Now let's take a look at the top burning questions facing this franchise into the offseason. For me, number one is goaltending. And do they already have the answer to that? Is Devin Levi the guy? Of course, Devin Levi signed after his college season was complete, and he did pretty phenomenal down the stretch. They wrote him to a number of wins, and it looked like to me like they were giving him every opportunity to be the number one. I mean, obviously, he's going to be a full rookie next year, full rookie season. I don't know that he's going to be able to play, 60, 70 games. So they need a solid tandem partner for Levi. But I have no doubts at this point that Levi is going to be on the NHL roster. He'll either be considered the starter or in a 1A, 1B scenario. But who's going to be working with him? Is it going to be Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen? Will they go with a tandem that's both young goaltenders? They put a lot of time and invested a lot of effort into helping Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen develop. There's some thought that maybe he could be traded, and they bring in maybe another veteran guy that might be better fit to help work with Levi. It sounds like Eric Comrie is not really seen as being part of the future, so they might try to move on from him as well. It's debatable. The goaltending is a big question mark for this team. But like I said, if Levi can play fairly consistent like he did down the stretch after he came out of college, they're going to be in good hands, and they're going to have themselves a real solid netminder for the future. Their goaltender of the future question seems to be answered there, but it's a matter of who works with them and what kind of a workload they give them next year. So we will see how that works out. Another big question is the leadership side of this team, as I mentioned. Is Kyle Okposo the captain? Is he going to be back? Obviously, if he is, he's going to have to make substantially less money. There was some talk maybe he retires, but the belief is that he wants to continue playing. So we'll see if they don't bring Okposo back. Look for them to go into the UFA market and find somebody who might be comparable, as in an older veteran guy who can be a good leader for them and help the young guys. But I don't see any reason why they can't come to terms on a short-term contract for less money for Okposo to remain. Obviously, like I said before, and looking at the team stats, goals against have to be cut down. The penalty killing has to be improved. And that might have to come from, one, getting more consistent goaltending, which we just discussed should be possible if Devin Levi continues to play the way he has in the limited sample size that we saw down the stretch. But they likely might want to consider some roster moves as well, just to have maybe one or two extra players that are more specialized in helping kill penalties. That might be a good part of it. Obviously, they're a younger team as well. Lots of youth on this team. A lot of these players are not necessarily in roles that they're completely used to either, right? Some of these guys are used to being, higher profile players on their old teams when they were younger. You get to the NHL, you have to take some time to kind of find your way a little bit. So we'll see, but I would suspect that's going to be a big focus is how do you cut down on goals against? Yes, goaltending is part of it, but it's not the only part of it. Of course, they have the 2023 NHL Draft to look forward to. They're picking 13th overall, so one of the lower picks we've seen in recent years, which I'm sure they're happy about because of the progress we saw in a regular season. But will they keep that pick? I mean, that pick could turn out to be a player for the future, but they have so many young players that are already on the roster and viewed upon as being a part of the future. I mean, look at just in the last year, players that you've seen emerge on this forward group alone. I mean, look at Tate Thompson, who was there for a while and came over in the O'Reilly trade from St. Louis back a number of years back, but it took a little while for him, but he had just exploded. So he's under contract long term. You get Dylan Cousins now. You get Peyton Krebs. Jack Quinn's another guy. There's obviously lots. Middlestat's still young, and he finally has kind of found his way here. At some point, you're not going to have room for every single prospect. Do they consider trading that pick for another player who can really upgrade either top 6 or top 4 defense? Who knows? I mean, their defense is looking pretty good. I mean, Dahlin and Power, key members of the future. They signed Samuelson up longer term. Wouldn't be shocking, if they did try to find another top 4 defenseman. They might be able to find a way to upgrade there. They were interested in the Jacob Chickering deal before he went to Ottawa, so that tells us that they kind of feel like I think they like what they have, but if they might have an opportunity to upgrade there. So we'll have to see where that goes. It'd be interesting to see what this team does with the draft pick, because that could be a good currency to pick up a good player who can help them immediately and get over the hump. Certainly next year, you have to think their goal is not just to improve and to be in the running for playoffs, but to get in when you're that close and only a point shy. You're looking back at the season, looking at some overtime losses, or maybe a game where you blew a lead, or, all it would have taken is one more game to go your way, and you could have gotten in. It's pretty heartbreaking when you look at it, so close in that regard, right? So we'll have to see what happens. I don't think the Sabres are going to be a team that's like incredibly busy and making substantial changes. I think we're going to see more just small tweaks. I think they have a lot of the answers internally that's going to continue to grow as a group, and then they'll just kind of make some tweaks to see if they can get a little bit better, besides making a few key decisions like I mentioned before. So let me know your thoughts on the Buffalo Sabres in the 2023 offseason. What do you feel should be part of their plan? Do you think they're going to use that draft pick on a prospect, or will they trade that pick for another player who can help them now? And if they are going to trade it, who would they possibly target? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.